All right, I've taken your questions. We're live on Instagram Live and YouTube, I think. Call it Campus to Canton is live right now. Doing something different tonight, live on Instagram Live. It's Felix Sharp for CampusToCanton.com. I took some questions from our Discord. I'm going to be answering them here tonight. The season is about to start. I think that we need to be going live more often, not just once a week. So I kind of want to target at least 3 times a week based on the news, based on everything that's going on. You can let me know in the chat if that's something that you would be interested in. And I'm thinking, 2 shows earlier in the week where we actually discuss the game on the field, and then 1 show where we take a mailbag. So again, if that's something that you're interested in, go ahead and like the video, drop a comment in the chat, like the video, subscribe to the channel, all of that natural stuff. All right, so I took some questions from our Discord. Hold on, let me make sure that we are streaming on Instagram Live. Okay, we are. We're live on Instagram Live too, so I just checked. All right. This question is first from Chris Moxley. He says, what do you think the next 12 to 18 months of college fantasy will look like? Let's check in on the college football world just from a coverage point of view and media. Let's see what's happening. So, of course, Josh Pate at CBS is getting a new studio. Now, I personally think that that's significant because there aren't that many studio shows in college football if you look across the network. I'm talking about like non-pregame type shows. Paul Feinbaum has one. ESPN has College Football Live, but I'm pretty sure that those hosts broadcast from their house. I don't think that there's a studio. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. Matthew Berry hires Thor Nystrom. Yahoo hires Caroline Fenton to cover college football. NBC Sports just today hired Nicole Auerbach, formerly of The Athletic. Of course, EA Sports releases College Football 25, and it's been, probably their most popular game in some time. Underdog, whose investors include Mark Cuban, Adam Schefter, Kevin Durant, they just released their first, second, and third tournaments. They released one today, and the season starts in 2 weeks. So they think that tournament is going to fill. The fact that they had one tells me that they believe that there's a future in college football. The fact that they had 3 tells me that they really think that there's a future in college fantasy football. By the way, promo code C2C for a deposit match of up to $250. We have all of that. And then today, I was listening. Speaking of The Athletic, I was listening to Andy Staples' show. He's now on 3, and they were talking about college fantasy football. I don't think that we would have been there in the same position this time last year. I don't think that we would have been in the same position this time last year with Underdog, with Andy Staples talking about college fantasy. It seems like there is some momentum in college football overall, but that's trickling down to the college fantasy space. So where does that leave us? Where is the growth going to come from? Yahoo, a few years ago, they tried college fantasy and they discontinued it. I actually spoke to somebody from Yahoo, and they basically said there was a lack of interest. That was like almost 10 years ago now. CBS years ago, even before Yahoo had college fantasy, I believe it was discontinued for the same reason. ESPN, so that's the past. ESPN, that doesn't feel like a natural fit to me because it seems like ESPN's eggs are all in the NFL basket. They're into Monday Night Football and that sort of thing. It doesn't feel like they're prioritizing college football outside of television rights. The recruiting coverage kind of pales in comparison to On3 and 24/7 and some others out there. So ESPN doesn't feel like a natural fit. That leaves us to Sleeper. Now, Sleeper, popular fantasy site. I think Kevin Durant is actually an investor in Sleeper also. I get the impression that Sleeper sees itself as Chick-fil-A, and the community asking Sleeper to run college fantasy is akin to us asking Chick-fil-A to serve a burger. Like, they just don't think that it's really in their bailiwick. That's based on my conversations with them personally, some secondhand conversations that I've heard. They do have that handle, which is weird. They just tweet weird stuff all the time. And they do have some college football betting on their platform, but I don't get the impression just yet that they're interested in college fantasy. There's some smart people there in Silicon Valley, so I know that they know what they're doing, but it doesn't seem like that's the where we're going yet, at least in the next year or so. This is what I think is going to happen. You had Underdog this year. I think next season we might see some growth from DraftKings and FanDuel, those guys. Or in the DFS space, we might see the growth of college fantasy. It might be there first and then trickle down to traditional college fantasy. The problem is, what I perceive the problem to be, is that some of the executives here at these networks and at the platforms, not Sleeper, but the other ones, we're talking about 50 and 60-year-old men who are running these things. They haven't played college fantasy. They have not played college fantasy. And age regardless, I mean, I know that people in Silicon Valley at Sleeper are young, but they haven't played college fantasy either. So it's going to take, a real pull from the community or something to get in the ear of those influencers. And trust me, we're doing everything we can to get into the ear of those people, the people that actually make decisions. One other thing I was thinking is that what if the players embraced it? We've interviewed tons of players around here. Avery Johnson, Justice Haynes, Damian Martinez, Ashton Genty. What if in the future we brought these players on and asked, why should you be a first-round pick? Why should the college fantasy community select you? And if we can get the players to embrace it, maybe we can reverse engineer this thing and get interest that way. So Chris's question, where do I think college fantasy is going to be 12 to 18 months from now? I think next season we may see some growth. I would almost guarantee that we see some growth in the DFS space. And I think it will be between next season and the season after that. We're talking, that would be 2026, where we actually get another platform, a major platform, to offer college fantasy football, traditional college fantasy football. Maybe Power 5 or Power 4, maybe all 134 FBS teams. That's just what I think. You can let me know what you think in the comments or in the chat. In the chat, by the way, I see Caleb has joined the chat. I see Hannah in the chat. I see this is on Instagram. I see Blaze on Barstool joined. I see OK Bastard joined. Justin Halsley asks, how do you think college football 25 is fueling interest? We said this whenever the announcement was made. I don't know if it was a year ago or 2 years ago now. It was actually 2 years ago now. We said with the names being on the game, people are going to have a better understanding of who those players are. You're going to know who Torrey Horton is. You're going to know that Jam Miller and Justice Haynes are splitting the backfield. You're going to people are going to want to play with Kyron Drones because he's a dual threat, and they're going to know those players' names. It's not just going to be quarterback 7 or wide receiver 15. People are going to come to know these names. It's the same thing that happened with like NBA Jam back in the 90s. It's the same thing that happened with Madden. Like, you learned the players' actual names, and eventually that popularized fantasy sports. That's at least my impression. I think that we'll see the same thing happen with college fantasy. These players, not only college fantasy, but NIL, these players will become more recognizable. We're not like that far away from a player in college having a signature Nike shoe. We're just not that far away. It could be Cam Coleman. It could be Jeremiah Smith, where he's in Nike commercials as a sophomore at Ohio State. I don't think that we're that far away from it. So thank you for the question, Justin. This is from our Discord from Soup Y Nam. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Houston breakdown. He would like a Houston breakdown, but his question is, if Parker Jenkins has a breakout year, does he have legit Devy value? Parker Jenkins, running back there. He had just under 500 yards as a true freshman last season, 5'11", 200 pounds. I think the answer to that question is no. I took a look at Parker Jenkins this offseason because I'm like, where is the value at the running back position? I'm struggling to find, players who could be, dudes, have excellent seasons, project for high draft capital after the names we know: Marion Hampton, Ollie Gordon, Ashton Genty, Caleb Jackson, of course, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, after those guys. And I took a long look at Parker Jenkins, and he's just kind of there's nothing exceptional about him. And if you're playing in the G5, you have to have some sort of exceptional trait. And I'm not sure that he has that just yet. I haven't seen it. Just kind of a more well-rounded player. I actually think Alton McCaskill, when he was at his best, a freshman there at Houston, that he was a guy that probably you could project for, day 2 or day 3 NFL draft capital. Now, his career has since been derailed from since then. Injury, going to Colorado, transferring to Arizona State now. But I when I look at those two Houston running backs, I kind of think Alton McCaskill was an easier projection to the NFL than Parker Jenkins was. But I would tell you what, if you want a G5 running back in Texas that could potentially be a guy at the next level, or even this season in 2024, I would head west on I-10 and end up in San Antonio, where Kavorian Barnes is. I'm a big fan of Kavorian Barnes. I think that he's exceptionally explosive for his size. Kind of a bowling ball, shorter to the ground, but still thick and still explosive. Didn't have a great sophomore campaign last year. I'm looking for him to bounce back in 2024, and I think that he's a guy that could have an NFL future. So I'm a fan of Kavorian Barnes. I like Parker Jenkins fine from a volume perspective and what we think he's going to get. So if you're talking about straight up college fantasy, how many points is he going to score? I think that it's fine to draft Parker Jenkins with that expectation, but I don't think that he's going to be a guy at the next level. Remember, Sincere McCormick coming out of UTSA, he showed some exceptional skills, in my opinion, and didn't end up becoming anything. So it's really hard to come out of that level and to make the jump to the NFL. Fantasy Outlaw asks, which college offenses do you think will have the biggest improvement and which will have the biggest drop? I think that there's a couple of programs that stand out really easily. One is Utah. You get Cam Rising and you get Brant Keithy back. I mean, those were the centerpieces of your offense. How can we not pick Utah to have a bounce back season in the Big 12 for Coach Whittingham this year? Still going to ground and pound, but you get Cam Rising in his last year of eligibility. You get the tight end back. I think that Utah is up there. How about Michigan State? Bringing in Jonathan Smith, bringing in Aiden Childs, who has been as advertised. If you read the practice reports there coming out of East Lansing, Jack Velling is getting rave reviews. I've been a fan of Nate Carter for a long time. They bring in the running back Adams from UMass or whatever. I think that we could see Michigan State improve. Now, are they going to be a player in the Big Ten? No, probably not. They don't know that they have the horses just yet. But Jonathan Smith has done all right with, less talent there at Oregon State. I think he's going to be fine eventually at Michigan State. But if I'm talking about a team that's going to make a jump in 2024, I'm looking at Utah. I'm looking at Michigan State, those two programs. And, one where you have players coming back, the other where you have a coaching change and some new talent there in the program in East Lansing. A team that I could see take a step back in 2024. I feel like you have to go to Texas here. Texas, we've seen the injuries the last couple of weeks with Christian Clark, with CJ Baxter, but let's think about what they're losing overall coming into 2024. You're losing the centerpiece of your offense in Xavier Worthy. You're losing a big contributor in Jatavian Sanders. And I'm sorry, the centerpiece of your offense last year was Jonathan Brooks. You lose him, and then you lose his replacement in CJ Baxter. Now, you people have been telling me about Quinn Ewers forever. If there was ever a time for a guy to step up and carry a team on his back, it would be this year, because so in Texas in the backfield, you're left with Jadon Blue, Gibson, and Trey Wisner. If you're going to give the carries to Blue, he's not like an interior run it through the back of the line of scrimmage guy. You are going to have to, get him in space. Don't use him as a hammer. That makes it that makes you're going to have the Quinn Ewers is going to have to play better. He might be throwing the ball 35 plus times a game, given that, you don't have a Mark Ingram type in the backfield that you're just going to hand the ball off to. So as far as a team that could take a step, oh, by the way, they go to Ann Arbor in week 2. They go to Ann Arbor, that big ass defensive tackle that's going to like a run a 4-3. You got Will Johnson there. I mean, I know that we think that Michigan will take a step back this year, but that game is in Ann Arbor. That defense is still going to be really solid on their home turf. So offensively, I think that Texas could take a step back unless Quinn Ewers elevates his play. Otherwise, he's going to be exposed. How about James Madison? James Madison is an easy one. You lose Kirk Cignetti. You lose Elijah Surratt. You lose Reggie Brown is now their second leading receiver is now with the Chiefs. You lose Jordan McLeod to Texas State. I mean, James Madison has to be one. They are 119th in returning production according to the C2C winning edge returning production data there. And then lastly, I mentioned Jonathan Smith going to Michigan State as being an improvement. Well, I mean, Oregon State gets gutted this year. They lose Damian Martinez, Jack Velling, Silas Bolden. Both their two top quarterbacks, DJ Uiagalelei and Aiden Childs. You have to point to Oregon State. And it's unfortunate because I was a fan of Giovanni McCoy at Idaho since his redshirt freshman season. That redshirt freshman season 2 seasons ago, they played Washington State on the road in that first non-con game. I wanted to watch Cam Ward because he was coming from Incarnate Ward. I believe that was his first game. It was Giovanni McCoy who stood out to me in that game and had been following him ever since. I think he won, the freshman award there at the FCS level for Idaho. He transfers and then lands in Oregon State this year. I'm like, okay, that's a rebuilding program. Don't really like that, but I've got to say Oregon State as far as a team that's going to take a step back there. Appreciate the comment, Kevin. All here for the future growth. So am I. I'm all here for the future growth also. And I see you, Santis, Aiden to the moon. If you're in East Lansing, don't be scared. Go ahead to MLK in Lansing, MLK in Mount Hope area, I think. Fresh fish. Try the shrimp. The cracked chicken is the famous thing there, but I want you to get the shrimp. So Aiden, if you get this, take the 15-minute trip into actual Lansing off MLK and go to Fresh Fish and get the shrimp. All right. Jack Siebert asks, which position class will have more of an impact? Oh, let me face the microphone. Which position class will have more of an impact over the next 3 to 4 years? The 2024 wide receiver class or the 2025 freshman class. So Jack here is asking about this wide receiver class that, according to the recruiting services, the rankings coming in, and then what they're actually doing on the field, what we're hearing in practice, it's been exceptional. You're talking about Jeremiah Smith, Cam Coleman, Ryan Wingo, Micah Hudson, who hasn't had that success just yet, Bryant Wesco, TJ Moore, like all of these guys are having exceptional camps. Now, this freshman quarterback class next year is said to be very athletic and somewhat comparable to the 2023 quarterback class. Remember that 2023 quarterback class included Dante Moore, Malachi Nelson, Arch Manning, Jackson Arnold. There's always the fifth person that I forget. There's always the fifth quarter. Oh, Nico Iamaleava. In the 2025 class, you have all guys who are like dual threats, can do everything. Bryce Underwood, Belleville stand up, going to LSU. Tavian St. Clair going to Ohio State. Keelan Russell going to Alabama. Hudson Longstreet going to Texas A&M. Deuce Knight, who's currently committed to Notre Dame. Could he flip to Auburn? Kamario Taylor, currently committed to Mississippi State. Like, there are all of these guys who are just dynamic players. And Alfred Fernandez talked about this yesterday. We've got like 6 quarterbacks who have an athletic score according to our database above 90. That's really good for a class. But if I had to pick between these two, I'm going to listen. We have virtually no information on the field for either of these guys, but the 2024 wide receiver class, Cam Coleman at Auburn, Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State, Bryant Wesco at Clemson, TJ Moore at Clemson. We have more data points on a college football practice field for that group. So if I'm going to make a bet here, I'm going to bet on those guys. I'm going to bet on those guys on that wide receiver class. I mean, and plus, as good as that 2025 class is, there's no Jeremiah Smith. Jeremiah Smith is the highest rated wide receiver recruit ever, above Julio Jones. Well, actually, the second highest is Dorial Green-Beckham. After that, it's Julio Jones. So, there's not that type of alpha dog in the 2025 class. Really good quarterback class, just not, highest rated recruit ever at the position in that class. So give me the wide receiver class. Boss Hoss asks, am I looking forward to the FX Aaron Hernandez show? FX makes excellent TV. Louis and Atlanta are two of my favorite television shows of all time. What's the one with Selena Gomez and the two older comedians, Martin Short and Steve Martin? That's an excellent show. That's an FX production. That being said, I haven't raced to watch their docudramas, the one on the Lakers and this one. I feel like I lived through that. I feel like I lived through it. So I don't know. It's just not something that I would really want to go watch. Matthew Fox is actually a movie critic. Matthew Fox, one of our contributors, is a movie critic, and he's heard that it's very, very good, but that it makes Urban Meyer and Bill Belichick look bad. So I actually might watch it just based on that recommendation. So am I looking forward to the show? I'll tell you what I am looking forward to. I'm looking forward to this damn Netflix documentary on Connor Stallions. I'm not going to miss that. I will binge those episodes or whatever when that thing comes out, because how did this dude get on the Central Michigan sideline and who knew about it? That's what I want to know. That's what I want to know. How did he get on that Central Michigan sideline? This is from, I actually don't remember who this is from. I'll look it up here in a second. But are there specific position battles where the outcome might surprise people? Sure. Is it a position battle at USC, Jaden Mayava and Miller Moss? I think that would be an interesting outcome if Mayava actually won it. How about going to WKU, Western Kentucky? Shout out to Hannah. Western Kentucky always has an interesting quarterback battle, it seems. And we're always paying attention to it because we want to recreate that Bailey Zappi, Jareth Stearns year with that first year with Zach Kitley. So we're always crossing our fingers that we can get, last year it was Austin Reed and who was the player that the Jets drafted? The Jets drafted. You know who I'm talking about. So I would look at that quarterback battle between TJ Finley and Caden Veltkamp. I didn't watch TJ Finley last year, but I did watch him when he was at Michigan and LSU. I've never been particularly impressed with him. On the other hand, Caden Veltkamp in the bowl game last year led the comeback. So I would think that, and I actually just drafted Caden Veltkamp in a spot. So Western Kentucky, I'm looking at that quarterback battle. If Caden Veltkamp takes it over TJ Finley, that would be interesting. How do you not go to Boise State here? How do you not go to Boise State, where it appears that Malachi Nelson is going to be the backup to Maddox Madsen? Malachi Nelson, a lot of people had him as the number one player in the class overall last year, and he's going to Boise and isn't going to start. We need to reevaluate what the heck we're doing if that's going to be the case, because he was going to be Lincoln Riley's apparent, the 5-star player, blah, 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 historic quarterback class, and now he can't beat out Maddox Madsen. I mean, I think a lot of people were saying, hey, Boise State has a chance for the playoff coming out of there if this 5-star guy is going to be at the helm, throwing to Caples, throwing to Austin Bolt, throwing to Prince Strong, and having Ashton Genty in the backfield. But if he's not going to be the starter, that just changes the outlook entirely. It was just so weird. it's so weird to me that it doesn't appear that he is in line to start. So Boise State, the quarterback battle there. But how about the Clemson wide receiver battle? Because a lot of us had high expectations for Adam Randall a few years ago. What, now in his third season or fourth season, coming off that ACL injury, his first year, a size speed freak. But if you ask the Clemson fans last year what was the weakness of the team, they would have told you wide receiver. And Adam Randall played last year. Antonio Williams was hurt. Adam Randall played. Bo Collins now at Notre Dame. So in Clemson, you've got Tyler Brown and Antonio Williams. They're going to be on the field regardless, it sounds like. Who is that third wide receiver spot going to go to? Bryant Wesco is all the rage. I love TJ Moore. Doesn't leave a whole lot of room for somebody like Adam Randall, a guy that we had high expectations for. Could we see him hit the transfer portal after camp if he's not, somewhere in the rotation that he's comfortable with? I think that there's the potential for, if it's not at the end of camp, it's at the end of the season that we see Adam Randall hit the transfer portal, because I do expect those two freshmen to take a step in year one for Garrett Riley and Cade Klubnik and company. Let's go to North Carolina. Let's go to Chapel Hill, the quarterback battle between Connor Harrell, Max Johnson, and Jacoby Criswell. Has anybody ever watched Max Johnson and said, he's got it? That dude's got it. That dude's got it. I don't think so. Connor Harrell last year, I want to go look up his stats in that bowl game, because people have been torching Connor Harrell like he's not a player that has some skills that you can work with. And we have thought that he did since his freshman season. Freshman season. So he went 18 for 27, 199 yards, did complete 66% of his passes, 1 touchdown to 2 interceptions. He had 17 carries for just 25 yards. I mean, that was his first starting experience. If I'm Chip Lindsey, if I'm Mac Jones, I'm starting Connor Harrell over Jacoby Criswell and over Max Johnson. Now, it doesn't sound like it's going to be that way. It sounds like they're going to give it to Max Johnson. So that's one that I'm paying attention to. And Connor Harrell, by the way, dual threat ability. So from a college fantasy perspective, we want Connor Harrell to be the starter. It doesn't seem like it's going to be that way. I was a fan of Jacoby Criswell when he was allegedly in the running to start with Drake May back there, and Mac Jones had to flip a coin to figure out who was going to start the spring game. Remember that nonsense? And since then, so I feel like I heard this on the Cover 3 podcast, that Mac Jones didn't want Jacoby Criswell to leave. So they played up the fact that there was this quarterback battle and that it was so tight and that, he could have started over Drake May and that it was nonsense. So Jacoby Criswell back there at UNC. I did like him at one point, goes to Arkansas, backs up KJ Jefferson. But I want to see Connor Harrell start. So I would be surprised in that one if Connor Harrell was the guy and they gave him an opportunity to work out some of the kinks. He only had one start last year. But by the way, throwing 2 interceptions in your first start, 18 for 27, 199 yards. Yeah, I'll live with that. I'll live with that as a redshirt freshman starting his first game. All right, let me go to the Discord here, because some questions that I wrote down answers to, but I didn't actually remember the game. If you've made it this far, the actual question, if you've made it this far, I appreciate it. If you liked the video and subscribe to the channel. All right, here we go. I thought the question was, who's my team? Who did this come from? I know that the question was the question was, okay, this is from Math Labs. MLT, I'm not even saying that right. Norwich, you know who you are. What team do you support, if any, and who are some of your favorite players of all time? Boy, oh boy, I'm glad you asked. Because I grew up in Michigan. I grew up a Detroit Lions fan. My uncle played in the NFL for 13 years for the Arizona Cardinals. He was a 3-time Pro Bowl left tackle there in the LT era. LT, the linebacker. Why am I forgetting everything? Anyway, he was in that era. And so, you know, a lot of my favorite players have Michigan ties, either to the Detroit Lions or to the Michigan Wolverines. Charles Woodson, when I was in third grade, that was 1998. He was winning the Heisman Trophy, or he was on his way to win the Heisman Trophy. We had civic orientation where we had to talk about somebody. Me and my mom went to the Kalamazoo Public Library. We looked up all this stuff on Charles Woodson, and I did my speech on Charles Woodson. David Terrell is one of the guys who wore number 1. I'm very sensitive about who wears number 1 at Michigan because it's Anthony Carter, David Terrell, Braylon Edwards. You know, last year it was, I already forgot his name. He should not have had the number 1 wide receiver jersey. I don't think that anybody should have had it for Michigan. I don't think that anybody should have. Anthony had it as a freshman. Anthony had the number 1 jersey as a freshman. You had to earn that jersey when I was growing up. Braylon Edwards had number 80 his freshman and sophomore year, and I think that he got number 1 his junior year. It took him 3 years to get the jersey. So David Terrell, Braylon Edwards. I was a big Herman Moore fan in the late 90s, Detroit Lions, number 84. 1998, that's also the Randy Moss's rookie year. And he had 17 touchdowns for the Minnesota Vikings, you know, set all kind of records with that offense with Randall Cunningham and Chris Carter and Rob Smith in the backfield. They went, 16-1? Lose to the Falcons in the NFC Championship game. That was one of the best teams of all time. If you ask anybody who was there, that was one of the best teams of all time. You think like Miami or Kansas City has a great offense. Minnesota back there, 1998 Minnesota, I would put them right up there with the Miami Dolphins, with the Kansas City Chiefs and those teams, if you're too young to remember those old Minnesota Vikings teams. This is a weird one. Louis Delmas, former safety for the Detroit Lions. He came at a time where we really needed help in the secondary. Coming out of Western Michigan. And we got a value from our second-round draft pick, and Louis Delmas was a big fan of his. DeAndre Levy out of Wisconsin might be the best after Corey Schlesinger. No, Corey Schlesinger is the fullback. There's the guy that used to be on college football from Ohio State who went to the Detroit Lions. Oh God, Detroit Lions. You guys will know the name. He's in the front office now. No, Steel Chambers. That is not who I'm doing. Chris Spielman. After Chris Spielman, DeAndre Levy might be the best linebacker the Lions have had, maybe ever. And then Kyle Vanden Bosch, you know, journeyman defensive end, edge rusher, but he just brought a mentality to the Detroit Lions that he was more impactful on the team than his actual stats, because you saw those defensive linemen, Corey Williams and Ndamukong Suh, Nick Fairley. I hated the Nick Fairley. We took Nick Fairley, the number 2 pick or whatever it was. That I hated that pick. But you saw our defensive linemen making plays 30, 40 yards down the field because of the energy and the tenacity and just the nonstop motor that Kyle Vanden Bosch played with. So we went to the playoffs in 2011, and you could say that Kyle Vanden Bosch was like a MVP of that team because of the energy that he brought, because of the example that he set. That defense really followed Kyle Vanden Bosch's example. And Kevin is a lifelong Lions fan. You can verify that, Kevin. You can verify that, Kevin, in the chat. So that's some of my favorite all-time players. Chris asks if I had to go. Chris Moxley asks if I had to go and do it all over again. With Campus to Canton, what would I do differently? That's an easy one. I would learn new skills faster. I would adapt faster. Video editing, graphics, those types of things. I would learn those skills faster, and then not be afraid to be bad when I started. That's a thing that you really have to be comfortable with, is being not so good when you start. Your first or second rep isn't going to be as good as your 100th or 200th or 10,000th. Even just doing a solo podcast right here, you have to be comfortable with awkward silences, with not remembering names, with, not looking at the camera, with all sorts of things. Just being comfortable with not being good when you start out. I think that's really, really a key. Shout out to Santi Silver Stray on Instagram, 517 Cunningham, 517. That's Lansing's area code. So you got to know where Fresh Fish is. I got to imagine that you know where Fresh Fish is. That's Lansing's area code. All right, what other questions do we have here? How do we reach new audiences? That's from how does C2C reach new audiences, groups and audiences? That's from Marcus in the Discord. I think you just have to keep existing, keep doing what it is that you're doing. So many people quit when their podcast gets 15 downloads, when it gets 50 downloads, when it gets to 100 downloads. You might get excited for a while and then you're not content with that. We have about 3,500 subscribers on YouTube, and it would be easy to be unsatisfied with that number. But then I'm like, there's 3,500 people that are interested in what we have to say on this channel. We have a substantial number of subscribers. I'm not allowed to say the number, but to think that number of people are interested in the product that we have to produce, I mean, you just have to be grateful for the journey. Everyone who's, a big content creator in this space, in any space, regardless of niche, whether it be fitness or real estate or Bitcoin or entrepreneurship or whatever, they all got to this point. They were all at this point. They were at this point at somewhere along their journey where they had 3,500 subscribers on YouTube. They had 5,000 subscribers on followers on Twitter, and they were trying to figure out, how can I grow? And a lot of them grew because they just didn't quit. They just didn't quit, and they kept trying new things. We're doing something new tonight. We're doing something new tonight in live streaming on Instagram. So it's just you just can't quit and keep getting better. So what else do we got here? All right, Norwich asked me, he wants me to review his 40-team startup, and I actually might look into a few of those picks if I don't see. Main Event says he just saw college fantasy football on ESPN2. I want to know what the heck he's talking about. That's in the Discord. He just sent that at 7:26. I have no additional information, but I'm looking for these questions here in the Discord. I might go to that. I might go to that draft and just talk about the draft a little bit. So what team do you support? I already answered that question. I think that I got to all of the questions. If you asked a question in the Discord and I didn't get to it, I apologize. I thought I wrote them all down. So, but we're going to do this every week. So, we will be back. All right. So, all right, here's Norwich. I am going to do this because I think that it's fun to talk about drafts. I'm just going to read these off really quick and just talk about some of the picks. He has the 111. So he had the 111 and he had the second pick. It alternated 11 to second pick every round. This is a startup draft. He went Ashton Jeanty at Boise State, Devin Neal at Kansas, DJ Giddens at Kansas State, Damian Martinez at Miami, Alec Amayor at Stanford, Xavier Restrepo at Miami, Cam Ward at Miami, Marquarius Squirrel White at Tennessee, Bryant Wesco at Clemson, LaQuint Allen at Syracuse, Thomas Castellanos at Boston College, Damon Williams, the freshman quarterback there at Washington, Jalen Buckley, Kalamazoo stand up, the sophomore running back at Western Michigan, Jalen White, the guy sharing the backfield there with Donaldson at West Virginia, Sam Levitt, the quarterback, the Michigan State transfer to Arizona State quarterback at Arizona State, Krishawn McCray, the wide receiver. I think he's also I thought he was a running back too at Kent State. Evan Vasco, the quarterback at Coastal Carolina. I don't even know who this is at New Mexico. Nate Frazier at Georgia. Ransom at Rice. Robinson, the wide receiver there at App State. Cedric Irvin Jr. at Stanford. Went back-to-back on Stanford players, Cedric Irvin Jr. and Ashton Daniels. This is interesting. He took Ashton Daniels before Donovan Smith. And Donovan Smith is the one who's been getting first-round NFL draft buzz from people who are looking at box scores or looking at, I don't know what they're looking at. But and by the way, I was a Donovan Smith fan when he was at Texas Tech, and his dad was like the running backs coach, and he came in as an athlete. So, I was a fan of his at one point. He took Dean Connors in the 25th round, Demir Blankenship at Memphis, 25th, Willis, the tight end at Middle Tennessee, in the 27th, Sam Roush, the tight end at Stanford, 28th, and then Pierce Clarkston, the backup quarterback at U of L, Jordan Moore, wide receiver at Duke. Let's go through some of these that are actually we got Hoss Haney. Hoss Haney is a dual threat, really fast quarterback at TCU. The problem is I don't know when he's going to play, but he's a really dynamic player at TCU. I've talked about him a lot. He took Tiger Bachmeier, the sophomore wide receiver there at Clemson. Jacob Zeno, who is Trent Dilfer's signal caller there at UAB. Daniel Jackson, the wide receiver at Minnesota, who a lot of people think could have a great season in 2024 and parlay that into NFL draft capital. Took him in the 39th. Took Emmett Mosley, who has been getting Emmett Mosley, wide receiver there. He took a lot of Stanford players. Guess you like Troy Taylor. He took a lot of Stanford players. Emmett Mosley has been getting a lot of hype in both the spring and in camp. He was injured actually in camp. I don't even know if he's back. He's still been getting a lot of buzz there for the Stanford Cardinal. Took him in the 40th. And that's those are all of the the impact players. So what am I going to say? It's hard to. So right after Ashton Genty, Ryan Williams was taken. I would have to see the rest of the board here. This is why Norwich wanted me to read this draft, is because I have advocated for do not take running backs early in campus to Canton leagues, because you have a longer window if you draft those wide receivers. Speaking of wide receivers, again, Ryan Williams was taken right after his pick here in the first round. Cam Coleman was taken right before his pick in the second round. I want to get some of these top 10, top 15, maybe even top 20 wide receivers. And there are some quarterbacks that I feel really, really confident about. Carson Beck is one. I don't know how far he fell. Lenore Sellers is probably not a first round draft pick, but I would really have to see the entire draft board to evaluate this. But starting with 4 running backs, and none of whom is guaranteed to be a first round draft pick in the NFL. That's fine for the college fantasy side. Genty, Neal, Giddens, Damian Martinez. I mean, you probably have a shot. Let's actually look at your roster from a college fantasy perspective. You're going to start all of those guys. They're probably going to be in your flex. Genty, Neal, Giddens, Martin. Your starting wide receivers are Alec Mayor and Xavier Restrepo. Xavier Restrepo could finish as the number 1 wide receiver overall. Eric Mayor, he could finish. Now, Eric Mayor's production is really disproportionately based off of that one game that he had against Travis Hunter in Colorado. But, if we expect him to make a jump and progress in 2024, then he could be, a top 15 wide receiver there for Stanford, especially with Ashton Daniels starting this season and being the starting quarterback and not going back and forth between he and Justin Lamson. Squirrel White, we expect him to take a jump with Nico Iamaleava and be more and more of a deep threat this year. I think Squirrel White had 1,000 yards receiving last year. I could be misremembering that. I think he had like a quiet 1,000 yards receiving for Tennessee. Let's bring up he had 800 yards. He had 800 yards receiving. He had 300-yard games last year. And none of us like Joe Milton. I don't care what the Patriots fans say. But like if you watch college football, you are not a fan of Joe Milton. So we could expect Squirrel White to take a jump. Bryant Wesco is not going to be fantasy relevant this year. LaQuint Allen will be. Thomas Castellanos, I'm a little worried about Bill O'Brien and his fit. I've talked a little bit about that. Jalen Buckley will be a player that you can start at the running back position. So will Jaheim White there at West Virginia. Krishawn McCray, you should be able to start. Dean Connors, you should be able to start. Ashton Daniel. Who are your starting quarterbacks? Cam Ward, Castellanos, Daniels, Smith. I mean, those are the guys that you can start. So, your team, from a college fantasy perspective, your team might be competitive. I mean, they should be. I mean, you got Ashton Genty at the 111. He's going to score 35 points a game. You definitely should be. And DJ Giddens might score 35 points a game also. I mean, let's not sleep on DJ Giddens. I've comped him to Devin, who's the Rashad White. I've comped him to Rashad White, former Arizona State running back. So I would give this, if we're talking from a college fantasy perspective and without seeing the other teams, I think I would give it a B. from a did I build a pipeline to the NFL, I would give this a C plus. Mike Valerie just texted me that I'm on the clock. Mike, I'm working here. Okay, I'm working here. Maybe we can make that pick live here on the show. So yeah, higher grade for CFF production, lower grade for NFL draft value. All right. If you like what it is that we're doing, either on Instagram or on YouTube, like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to us on Instagram, subscribe to us on YouTube. Again, I'm going to try to do this at least once a week moving forward. Definitely if you support it. So let's get this to, 30 likes if you want me to do this in the future as the college football season kicks off. It's just too much to talk about. And I don't got nothing else to do. All right. We'll talk to you next time. Peace.